Welcome to the Edufaith Essentials Educational Podcast. Edufaith Essentials is an educational podcast that provides essential information and tips about education, leadership, and topics about diverse learners. Diverse learners include students with individual education plans, services under the Individuals with Disability Education Act, Section 504 services, English speakers of other languages, and interventions. Edufaith Essentials' mission is to bring positive awareness to promote equity and inclusion in education by sharing topics about non-traditional learners. Edufaith Essentials' goal is to restore faith in education one student at a time by empowering listeners with knowledge. We all know that knowledge is power, so let's be powerful. Edufaith, EDU, education, and faith, trusting or believing in one's ability. Edufaith would love for you to join our family, so subscribe at www.edufaithconsulting.com and make sure you subscribe to the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page. I'm your host, Dr. Nakia. Thank you for joining me today. As always, sending you good vibes, love, peace, and happiness. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Edufaith Essentials podcast. This episode is titled The School Psychologist. Let's dive into our Edufaith inspirational story. I recently had the extraordinary chance to visit the legendary Ron Clark Academy in Atlanta, Georgia, and let me tell you, it was nothing short of exhilarating. The school truly fulfills its promise to revolutionize education with an electrifying blend of energy, innovation, and a genuine love of learning. As soon as I walked into the vibrant, mural-adorned building, I was swept away by the atmosphere buzzing with excellence and enthusiasm. The interactive classes were a sight to behold. The students were immersed entirely, collaborating, passionately debating, and exhibiting confidence as they spoke and answered questions in the classroom. Witnessing the incredible Ron Clark himself in action was an unforgettable experience. His dynamic energy, sky-high expectations, and authentic connection with each student showcased transformative teaching at its finest. The students' excitement was infectious. They were articulate, self-assured, and clearly beaming with pride for their learning community. It was a wonderful experience. I even earned my slide certification by taking the famous slide to the main floor, joining the ranks of educators who have embraced this joyous symbol of limitless learning, in which I was embraced and welcomed at the bottom of the slide by the wonderful students. The entire visit was nothing short of inspirational and powerful. And it's a powerful reminder of what's achievable when passion and purpose converge in education. For any educator looking to rekindle their passion, the Ron Clark Academy offers a fantastic professional development, engaging site visits, and transformative training experiences that exemplify innovation, equity, and pure joy in teaching and education. Kudos to you, Ron Clark. He also has a book that's published about the essentials of teaching. I would tell you to take a look at that book as well. That's a great book for new teachers. Kudos to you, Ron Clark, for what you have done in creating a infectious, energetic, and absolutely amazing learning atmosphere. It is something that I will never forget, and I am so proud to be an educator and to see such a wonderful experience in education in Atlanta, Georgia. So if you're ever in the area, please schedule a visit to the Ron Clark Academy. You will not be disappointed. And that is it for our Edufaith inspirational story. As always, this will be on the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page. You can follow the link, and I will encourage you to click on that link, explore the Ron Clark Academy, and see all the dynamic things and resources that are there for educators, leaders, and parents. And that is it for our story. Now let's shift to our dates to remember for the month of November. Can you believe it? We're in November already. All right, November is National Career Development Month, National Scholarship Month, American Indian and Alaska Native Heritage Month. November is also National Scholarship Month, National COPD Awareness Month, Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Month, Alzheimer's Awareness Month, Diabetes Awareness Month, Epilepsy Awareness Month, Lung Cancer Awareness Month, and then Prostate Cancer and Men's Health Awareness Month. When we look into our dates for November, the specific dates, We have November 2nd is Daylight Savings Time. That's when Daylight Savings Time ends. November 3rd through the 7th is National School Psychology Week. November 3rd through 7th is also International Stress Awareness Week. November 7th is Cancer Awareness Day in India. November 8th is National STEM and STEAM Day. November 10th through the 14th is Geography Awareness Week. November 11th is Veterans Day. November 11th is also my anniversary. Happy anniversary to my husband, Colin. We are in it for 2 years. Happy anniversary, dear. November 12th is World Pneumonia Day. November 13th is World Kindness Day. November 13th through the 19th is Transgender Awareness Week. November 14th is World Diabetes Day with the United Nations. November 15th is American Recycles Day. November 16th is International Day of Tolerance with the United Nations. November 16th through the 22nd is National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week. November 17th through the 21st is American Education Week. November 17th through the 23rd is Geography Awareness Week. November 19th is National Education Support Professionals Day. November 19th is also World COPD Day. November 20th is World Children's Day. November 20th is National Parent Involvement Day. November 21st is Substitute Educators Day. November 21st is also Children's Grief Awareness Day. November 27th, one of my favorite holidays, Thanksgiving Day in the United States. For everyone celebrating birthdays in November, happy birthday, happy Thanksgiving, happy American Indian and Alaska Native Heritage Month, and happy American Education Week. And that is it for our dates to remember for the month of November. The year is almost over. Now it's time for Essential News. Story 1, Change in Data Reporting for Students with Disabilities. On August 22nd, 2025, the U.S. Department of Education announced a proposal to change how states report certain data on students with disabilities. Specifically, they want to stop requiring states to provide information about significant disproportionality, which looks at racial and ethnic disparities and how students with disabilities are identified, placed, and disciplined. Some advocates are worried that this change could weaken the federal government's ability to oversee and address these disparities. The department believes that simplifying the data reporting process will ease states' workloads. Still, critics argue that fewer data points could make it harder to ensure fair treatment for all students in special education. This topic is important for discussions about accountability and equity in education. Story 2, New Findings on Disability Discrimination in Schools. In September 2025, the Office of Civil Rights announced 5 cases of disability discrimination in schools in Florida, South Carolina, Virginia, and Wyoming. These findings led to agreements that require schools to make necessary changes, such as properly implementing accommodations for students with disabilities. This shows that OCR is still committed to protecting the rights of students. For those working in education, this news highlights the importance of civil rights and serves as a reminder of how schools must address complaints to create a fair learning environment. Story 3, Layoffs at the U.S. Department of Education. In early October 2025, reports revealed that hundreds of employees, around 466, were laid off from the U.S. Department of Education, including staff from key offices that oversee special education and civil rights. These cuts were part of a wider reduction in federal jobs during the government shutdown. This situation raises concerns about the government's ability to monitor special education programs and uphold civil rights protections effectively. Fewer staff members could lead to slower responses to complaints and overall reduce oversight, meaning families and teachers face more challenges in getting support for students in need. Story 4, Cancellation of Important Grant Programs. On September 12, 2025, it was announced that the Office of Special Education Programs, OSEP, will cancel 25 grants funded under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, along with additional cuts to the Rehabilitation Services Administration. These cancellations will affect 16 states and result in a loss of more than $18 million in funding. Many of the grants support essential services such as teacher training, parent resources, and training for students and working with students who are deaf and blind. Stakeholders argue that these programs are crucial in ensuring fairness in special education. And that is it for our essential news for November. There is a lot going on in special education, a lot of cuts. All these links will be on the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page. And remember, on the Edufaith Consulting website, make sure you go to www.edufaithconsulting.com. And if you go to announcements, you will see all the links to the news stories there. And that is it for breaking news. Now it's time for essential knowledge. In this episode, we will explore the essential role of the school psychologist. We are continuing the mission that we are better together and it takes a village. A school psychologist is a key professional who often works behind the scenes to nurture a healthy and thriving school community. School psychologists address mental health needs, support students with disabilities, and collaborate with educators and families, all aiming to help every child reach their full potential. I'm excited to be joined today by Dr. Millicent Phinizy, a clinical psychology postdoctoral fellow and certified school psychologist who work uniquely combines clinical and school-based mental health services. Dr. Phinizy earned her doctorate of psychology from Mercer University, a specialist from Georgia State University, and her bachelor's degree from Spelman College. At the Coralie Institute in Smyrna, Georgia, Dr. Phinizy provides psychological assessments and individual therapy for adults and children. She integrates trauma-focused care and multicultural responsiveness in her approach. Her expertise lies in the understanding of psychosocial impacts of trauma, adverse childhood experiences, and chronic stress, and how these factors influence both child development and adult functioning. Beyond her clinical practice, Dr. Phinizy is a passionate advocate for mental wellness and access to mental health services. She offers educational advocacy, professional training, and consultative services that enhance mental health supports in schools. Dr. Phinizy is also a leader in the field, having served as the past president of the Georgia Psychological Association of Graduate Students, as a current board member of the Georgia Psychological Association Political Action Committee, and as a member of the American Psychological Association's Model Licensure Act Task Force. We are honored to have her with us today to share her insights on how collaboration, compassion, and proactive mental health support can truly contribute to creating a positive school culture and a positive school environment. Let's dive in on this informative discussion about school psychologists, their role, and how they can support our students, parents, families, educators, and leaders. For today's episode of the November Edufaith Essentials Educational Podcast, we have our special guest, and she's going to talk to us about the role of a school psychologist. Her name is Millicent Phinizy, and she's going to dive in and give us some insights about the role of a school psychologist, as she is a former school psychologist. Without further ado, we're going to welcome Millicent Phinizy to our episode. Welcome, Millicent. Thank you for being here.
Hi, it's my pleasure. Always glad to help spread information about the profession of school psychology, and school-based mental health is something I'm very passionate about. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much, and I love it. First question we want to start off with is explain the role of a school psychologist and how they support students and students in general, but particularly students with disabilities.
Absolutely. So school psychologists are trained in the psychology of learning. So we are taught about mental health, but also about education, the learning processes. We learn about special education, regular education laws and policies and procedures, so that we can provide a bridge between students who have needs and just students who, maybe need a little extra support, and the teachers and the staff that work with those students. So our role is to come in to help schools identify, students who have, needs for additional supports, and then provide interventions to help with those difficulties that they may be having. And then a large part of our role is to conduct psychoeducational evaluations to determine if a student has a learning disability or an emotional behavior disorder or some other medical or mental health diagnosis that may be interfering with their learning or interfering with their ability to display their knowledge. So, a lot of the things that we do are geared towards helping students who may have specific and identified diagnoses and disabilities, but we also do help with the general population as well, with things like making sure that schools understand the process, what we call MTSS or multi-tiered systems of supports, which starts with how teachers are structuring their classrooms, how they are structuring their curriculum in order to get the best out of all students before we even get to the point of identifying students that have needs. So we do quite a range of things.
Awesome. Great information. And thank you for explaining that the role of a school psychologist. Speaking of testing, school psychologists are often associated with testing or
Mhm.
special education evaluations. What are some of the lesser known ways school psychologists support students, staff, and families throughout the year?
I'm so glad you asked that question because we school psychologists are trained to do so many things, and we often end up spending the vast majority of our time in things and activities that are surrounding the special education process, specifically evaluation and report writing part of the job. But there are so many other things that we can do. So, for example, when it comes to, let's take staff, for example. School psychologists can support staff through trainings. We do a lot of trainings, again, on that MTSS process. We do trainings on specific psychoeducational topics. I've had schools ask for training about how to work with students who maybe have executive dysfunction or maybe neurodivergent students. They may ask for training on how to improve their classroom behavior management strategies. So we do a lot of things like that. We do have knowledge and skill to do those kinds of things. We can also go into the classroom and help the teacher with implementing some of the interventions. Sometimes teachers struggle with figuring out how to integrate interventions into their typical day. And so that's something that we can help them do. We can come in and do observations of students when they're not quite sure what's happening, or if they're trying to figure out how to improve their classroom management, but they're not really sure what the need is. We can come in and do some assessments and observations for that. We also can do school-wide things as well in terms of helping to develop and facilitate school-wide interventions, including behavioral strategies and reward systems. So there's a lot of things we can do for staff. For students, one of the things that I always enjoyed was doing some group counseling. I would do some study skills groups. I've had the privilege of working with some students who had lost parents or close loved ones, or I've done some grief support groups in the past. When I was working at the high school, I had a support group for teen mothers, even. So that was something that I found very rewarding, helping those young ladies push towards graduation with their young children. With parents, we also do some trainings for parents. We can work with parents on how to support with homework at home. I've done some trainings in the past on how to understand those standardized test scores and what that means and how they can use that information to further their children's educational career. So I think the training element, going into the classroom, data analysis too, in terms of school-wide behavioral challenges, if the school is trying to understand why maybe they see an uptick in behavioral infractions during the lunch periods or, during a particular time of year. We're really skilled at data analysis. So we can often help with those types of things as well.
Wow, what a treasure trove of information. I'm over here writing information down. I did not know that a school psychologist did all of that. I did
Yeah,
not know about the training, the group counseling. I knew the data analysis and the evaluation and the writing reports and things like that, but didn't know you push in and do the behavior supports. So a school psychologist has a plethora of knowledge and holistic skills to support a school in general. And
absolutely.
I
Hmm.
didn't know that even in all my years of, being in education, never knew that the world of a school psychologist was so in depth and going in and pushing in beyond observations, but actually providing that support.
Yeah, and I will dare to say that most often a school psychologist may not offer to do those things, although we are very well trained and very well versed and capable in doing some of those things. They may not offer because they simply don't have time. Our caseloads for assessments can be really hefty
Mhm.
because most school psychologists serve more than one school. When I was working actively in the school district, I always had at least 3 school assignments. And if any of my schools were, maybe low or slow in regards to how many evaluation cases I was getting, I would be asked to go and help another school psychologist at their school. So we were kept busy in that way. And so we don't often have as much time as we would like to do some of those other things that we are trained to do. But because it was something that I enjoyed doing, I made it a point I made it a point to make
Mhm.
sure that it was incorporated into my regular schedule because it made my quality of life better to be able to be helpful in these additional ways, if that makes sense. So you might not have known that a school psychologist can do these other things because they just don't always have time to do them.
And that makes sense as well. I remember all of the reports, especially
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the year,
Mm-hmm.
and that,
Mm-hmm.
trying to get them finished before the summer, or
Yes.
even summer
Yeah.
testing, trying to get that done for the fiscal year. So I do remember that part, and that psychologists, you all did have a lot of different schools and things, but I just didn't know that that the role can be so versatile. And I love
Mm-hmm.
that.
And I would venture to say if we were allowed to do more of those things, we would probably have less of a need to do the testing because we could probably help students avoid getting
Correct.
to that point.
Correct. I totally agree with you. And that's a great point. The next question we're going to dive into as far as mental health and academic performance and how they intersect. So how do mental health and academic performance intersect, and what role does a school psychologist play in helping students achieve balance in both areas?
I absolutely love this question because for me professionally, having left the school system and advanced my career in the clinical psychology realm, so now I have school psychologist certifications and clinical psychology training. This is where my world meets now. So there are very broad ways that mental health can impact academic achievement, and then there are some more specific ways. So, broadly speaking, one's overall mood and emotional state definitely impacts their receptivity to learning. We all know when we're cranky, when we're hungry, we're not trying to hear much, right? Like we just
Agreed.
want to take a nap. We just need to get something to eat. Like if you're not in a good headspace, you're not going to be receptive to whatever the teacher is trying to explain to you. It's going to give Charlie Brown want, right?
Yes.
So, broadly speaking, things like anxiety can impact one's attention level.
Mhm.
If you are worried about something that's going on at home, if you are worried about where your next meal is coming from or whether your parents are going to get picked up by ICE, you're probably not paying that much attention to what's happening in the room with you. If you are someone who has a trauma history that maybe has impacted your confidence, your self-esteem, you may not perform up to your capability because you just lack belief in yourself. You doubt yourself. And so you question everything. You change your answers all the time and you just can't get it together, right? There are some students who trauma impacts them. And I know you asked about academics, but I have to bring in behaviorally too, because that then impacts the academics. If you've experienced trauma, a lot of times students may have a heightened reactivity. And so they may take things more personally. They may become more emotionally charged by something that otherwise might seem benign. And if you are behaviorally activated, again, your attention is not there. You're not in a position to learn and to receive information. So all of this is going to impact how you perform academically. So those are some of the broader things, right? More specifically, there are some specific mental health diagnoses that will impact learning. I talked a moment ago about executive functioning and how maybe I've done some previous training on executive dysfunction. Those are processing skills that are significantly impacted for individuals who are neurodivergent, so who have ADHD or autism, things like that, maybe even seizure disorders often have executive functioning problems as well. And so executive functioning, again, impacts one's ability to sustain attention, one's ability to recall information, understand directions, and things like that. And so it may also impact the way you are able to display what you have learned. That's also a concern for a lot of people, is that they have a lot of knowledge, but maybe because of a language disorder or some other mental health diagnosis, they're not able to adequately display all of the content that they have acquired in their head. So mental health really does play a really big role in our day-to-day. And I think that it's something that as a society, we need to pay more attention to with our young people, because the levels of anxiety and depression within youth has been rising steadily since the pandemic. And the rise of technology, I believe, and social media has a lot to do with that. And I know research does support those findings, that suggestion. And so I think as a society of adults and leaders and educators, we need to be paying attention to those things and being mindful of what our students are going through and how that's impacting how they're showing up in our classrooms and our schools every day.
I love that. And I agree with you. And just listening to you talk about it, I do agree. Yeah, mental health, but there's a challenge, then it will indeed, the way you presented it, it will indeed impact academics or the ability to concentrate or focus if you're focused on something else or you have anxiety. So I think that's really pivotal and really instrumental. And leaders and teachers really need to be mindful of that. And as a school psychologist, I'm listening and I'm hearing, and it sounds like the role of a school psychologist or the school psychologist can also help support with those mental health challenges on academics.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I think that we are well positioned to be able to do some analysis of the situation and really get to the heart of what is impeding this child's learning. Remember, I said that the school psychologist is trained in the psychology of learning, and that involves understanding what it takes to learn so that you can then understand the factors that will get in the way of that. And so with that knowledge, being able to go into a classroom or have a conversation with a student, pull somebody into our office, and do a little interview with them, can help us to better understand what's going on in their world and what's really getting in the way, because what we think might be the problem might not be the problem. I've had situations where we thought a child couldn't read, and at the end of the day, they just needed glasses. Like it's,
Wow.
it's things like that. Or,
Yes.
a teacher may think, oh, well, this child just is so angry when they come in this room and I just can't get through to them. And then you sit and you talk to the child and you found out it's because their lights are off at home. They haven't had water for weeks, So it's like sometimes we just have to get to the heart of it. But as a school psychologist, we might be able to help get to that a little bit easier because we can see things a little bit differently because of our training.
And I love that. That's awesome. And speaking of data, that leads to the next question. And you're already answering it. I just want to open it up a little bit more. How do
Sure.
school psychologists use data to identify needs and design interventions and track progress for students and school-wide initiatives?
Great question. So I think this is a good place for me to talk a little bit more about that MTSS process that I keep mentioning, the multi-tiered systems of supports. It used to be called RTI, a response to intervention. And everything within the educational field gets an uplift every so many years, and we just call things something different, but it's very similar. But what happens is if you kind of think about things from a pyramid perspective, down at the bottom of the pyramid is where all students lie. So we kind of call that our tier one or a baseline place. And so at that tier one level is where all students receive, general curriculum, general instruction from their teachers. We do screenings. Schools do screenings at that level. So that's some of those standardized tests that students take, like the COGAD and the Iowa or MAP testing. It depends on what school district you're in, what particular measures they're using.
Yes.
But data from those assessments helps to identify maybe the lower percentile of students or that are not meeting standards or that are underachieving. And so from that, the school will say, hey, these students need a little bit extra support. And a school psychologist can help with establishing some interventions that can be helpful for bringing those students up to grade level. Those students would move higher up in our pyramid to what we call like tier 2 interventions, where the teacher may be doing just differentiated instruction. So he or she may have a group of readers that are on level. They may have a group of readers that are a little bit above level, and they may have a group of readers that are a little bit below level. And so the group of students that are a little bit below level may be receiving some interventions to help with improving those reading levels. And those students are likely having been identified by some of those screening measures that were put into place, right? Then when those tier 2 level interventions don't really work, or if the student's not making the progress that is desired, then they may require some more specific or more individualized interventions. At that level, again, a school psychologist may be able to look at the data from classroom assessments, from those standardized assessments, from the tier 2 level interventions that the teacher was doing in the classroom, and be able to help them more specifically pinpoint what may be going wrong with that student, and then help to assign some interventions that are directly targeting that more specific issue. And so again, we're using data from the child's progress or lack thereof on these interventions to decide, okay, is this working? Can we keep the student at this level of support? Have we resolved the issue altogether and they can go back to just the general curriculum that everybody else is receiving? Or is this symptomatic of something more indicative of some kind of diagnosis or learning disability or something else that may require some specialized instruction? And so again, the school psychologist can help with identifying or analyzing that data to identify those students who may need some more specific supports and services, and then providing the teacher with some assistance on what interventions to implement and the like across the board there.
Wow, that is really, really good information. And I love that, the role of the school psychologist, once again, is holistic. So mental health, academics, interventions, using the data, tracking progress, moving students through this, as we call the tiers, the various tiers, but just provided that education support for a child. That's great.
Absolutely. And that intervention process, that tiered process, works for academic related needs for students, but also behavioral. So school psychologists can also help with identifying behavioral needs for students and developing interventions in those realms as well. And so I just want to make sure to add that information, and that it's not just on the academic side, but also on the behavioral side as well.
Yeah, I agree. And that makes sense. If they're misbehaving, they're not learning.
Exactly.
Teacher's
Exactly.
not
And they
teaching.
may be interfering with the learning of other students too.
Correct. Yeah. And the teacher can't teach. That's right. So the teacher can't teach what they're
Exactly. Yeah.
their
Yeah.
behavior.
If they're so busy addressing a student's behavior, they can't teach what they need to teach to everybody.
Yeah. So I'm glad you pointed that out. Perfect. All right. So let's shift to parents. You know, parents play a vital role in their child's well-being. How can parents partner with school psychologists to support not only their child's academic success, but emotional and social growth? So what tips would you have for parents, or give me just some insight on how parents can partner and some tips you may have?
Yeah. So parents can, I think one of the things that we want to make sure parents are doing is really paying attention to the grades that are coming home, the notes that are coming home, the standardized tests and things like that. And if they're not understanding these things, the school psychologist can be a resource for helping them understand what may be going on with their child and what their child might need. There are some times when, especially in situations where maybe the child is having some difficulties behaviorally, there may be some times when the parent might get to a place where they feel like the school is out to get me, or the teacher doesn't like my kid. And some of those feelings might be warranted, it might be valid from their perspective of it feels like my child is getting picked on. And maybe they don't feel comfortable asking the teacher or the principal for help. But I want parents to know that in many school districts, and you'd have to kind of, I don't want to say all, but in most school districts, the school psychologist does not work for the school. They are employed by the district. They're not hired and fired by the principal of the particular school. And that is important because if parents can understand that, then they can understand that the school psychologist can really be your ally, because that person does not have ties in that way to the school. They don't have to be worried about, oh, well, am I going to get fired if I say this thing or if I do this thing, right? They're not governed by the principal. That puts them at a very unique position to be able to stand on the data, to be able to make statements of opinion without fear of repercussion. And so if a parent is feeling like, I don't know if I can trust the school, go to the school psychologist, because they are the person that's going to give you an answer based on the data and the information without direct fear from, what may happen or what the principal might think or what have you. And I'm not saying that to throw principals under the bus or make teachers seem like bad people or like anybody really is out to get anybody. But I've heard that as a common refrain from parents when they get to the place of frustration. So I just wanted to put that part out there. The school psychologist can be a neutral person to help in some of these situations. So I would see them as a person that you can go and ask for help, ask questions like, hey, this is what I was told. Does that sound right? Another way that parents and school psychologists can partner is if a parent has their child evaluated privately outside of the school, share that with the school psychologist. Ask them, hey, I got this evaluation done. Do you think this is something that would be useful to the school? Should I share this? Or how can you help me with getting the recommended interventions or supports put into place that the private psychologist may have suggested at the end of their report? We can definitely help with that. We can talk you through the process. We can help make sure that the school understands the results of that private psychological evaluation and vice versa, and the parent understands as well. So that's another thing. And then the third thing I wanted to share specifically about parents is I want parents to feel comfortable sharing their concerns about their child early, because the earlier we can intervene, the more likelihood of a really good outcome. So a lot of families don't know that they can have an evaluation done as early as preschool, even if their child is not actively enrolled in the elementary school, because let's say they're not 5 or 6 yet, right? And so they may be 3 or 4, but they're noticing maybe some communication delays, or their social skills are not developing, or their fine or gross motor skills are not developing. They can request an evaluation from the school district even before their child is actively enrolled, because guess what? You pay property taxes, and your taxes go to fund the school. And so you can get those services and supports even before your child starts. And so reaching out early, asking for support when your child has a private psychological evaluation, and or asking for support when you feel like you're uncertain about your relationship with the teacher and or the administrative staff at the school. I think those are 3 ways that the psychologist can help parents.
Well, that was awesome. And I knew of some of those supports that school psychologists provide. I did not know about the psychological, because you pay taxes in the district. So that's a good
Yeah.
one. That's
And
a
that
good
goes for private school people. Let me say this
Correct.
too. If your student attends a private school and you want them to have a psychoeducational evaluation, you can also contact the school district about having that done. You'd have to set up an appointment for your child to come in to receive the evaluation. But again, you pay those property taxes, you can get that evaluation done through the school district. The caveat, though, is the private school is not necessarily required to enact any recommendations that the school suggests. And so if you want those supports or interventions put in place that the school suggests, you would have to enroll your child in public school to receive
district.
those. Yeah.
The district public school. That makes sense. All right, great information for parents. Thank you for sharing those tips. They were awesome. All right, teachers, let's look at our teachers, talk about our teachers. They're in the classrooms 6
Yeah.
hours per day, sometimes
Mhm.
longer times. So they're the
And
first.
then after.
Yeah, and then after, correct. So they're always the first line of student instruction, and they can see when students are struggling. So how can educators collaborate with school psychologists to address challenges, cultivate the classroom environment?
Yeah.
All things
Yeah,
education.
share the data. That's going to be the main thing. I think the biggest thing when you start having concerns with students and you're not really sure what's going on, when you're still even at that point of like, I'm not really sure why this child isn't getting it. Can you help me understand, or can you help me figure out? School psychologists can be helpful in that regard. When you do have an idea of what may be going on and you're trying to figure out some interventions for how to help or how to get to that, school psychologists have a treasure trove of interventions that they can pull from. If you're looking for help with figuring out how to integrate the intervention time into your regular school day, because teachers do so much. They already have a lot on their plates. And then, here we go asking them to do an intervention, find time to do an intervention.
Yes.
School psychologists, we might be able to help you with that, helping to identify where in your schedule this could fit. Or maybe there's some other people in the building who can do this intervention for you, like the EIP teachers, the early intervention program teachers, or ESOL teachers, or maybe the speech pathologist, or, a parent facilitator. I mean, there's just so many other people in the building that could potentially help. And so we could be helpful in that problem solving process of figuring out, how to get this intervention done. We can help you with how to collect the data, analyzing the data, to figure out what you want to do with the students next. We can also help, again, I think I said it earlier, but we can help with classroom management. So if you're having some difficulty with behavior management in your classroom, we can help you with developing classroom management systems, behavior reward systems for specific students versus the general classroom. We can also help teachers even just at the very beginning of the school year. And I don't think that many teachers even think about this. And I don't know how many school psychologists think about this, but I know that this is something we are trained to do that we could really help with. In the very beginning of the school year, when the teacher is setting up their classroom, a school psychologist could be very helpful to the teacher in structuring their classroom in a way that promotes increased attention and maybe even incorporating like sensory safe elements into their classroom. That is something that we sometimes don't think about until it's a problem. And then the school psychologist is maybe trying to help you figure out how to incorporate these things in the middle of the year. But it might be worthwhile to talk with the teachers about these things at the beginning of the year. Like, how do we set your classroom up to start with in a way that, maybe can help reduce the likelihood of some of these behavioral things even happening in the first place? So that's some ways that I think that a school psychologist can be helpful to teachers.
I love it. And I love the proactive approach.
Yeah.
Let's not be reactive. Let's proactive.
Mhm.
Already have those systems in place. So you can start day one. Harry Wong talks about the first days of school and having those procedures and processes, and systems in place and having that sensory spot in place. So students know that that's my safe space.
Right.
Friends. And it also aligns with what we were talking about academics and mental health. So I love that. Very resourceful. All right. Finally, for our leaders. Oh, I've learned so much just from this conversation, and I hope the listeners are learning everything too, because the role of the school psychologist, the whole theme of this whole year for season 4 of the podcast has been it takes a village. And so I'm trying to highlight how everyone has a role and everyone is involved and support each other to support students. So when we think about our principals and district leaders working with school psychologists and having them be essential members of their staff, their team, things like that, how can school psychologists leverage their expertise strategically to strengthen mental health supports, staff collaboration, success across the school community? And I know this is a long question, but just how can ed leaders work with school psychologists to support their schools, basically? And what tips you have?
I think it starts with making sure that the school psychologist is integrated into the school culture. And that can be very simple things, from making sure they have an actual office space. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've had to test kids in a closet that was cleaned out or in someone else's office and things like that. And I understand that we're not there every day, so we might not have a dedicated office space that is our own individual office. But even if it's a shared office space or just an expected place that we can go, and it's not like every time we get to the building, we have to figure out whose office is empty today, who didn't come to work today so I can use their room, or what conference room is open. Because that makes us feel like we're not really part of the school community. And it also sends that signal to the staff and the students as well that we're an outside person that's coming in for a moment and we're not really part of the school community. I think another thing that can help with integrating school psychologists into the school community and culture, because as you're talking about, it takes a village, right? So we want to feel part of that village. We want to be seen as part of the village, including the school psychologist in staff photos and activities when there's spirit weeks and things like that, and everybody's dressing up. And I come into the school building and I'm dressed in my regular work clothes, but everybody is dressed for Dr. Seuss Day or something, and I maybe didn't know. I kind of stick out a little bit, and so it may feel we enjoy those things too. So I always try to make my business to pay attention to those things so that that the students saw me as an integrated part of the building. So that's one thing about making us part of the school culture. But I think the educational leaders can also seek our input about the school culture, specifically sharing data. Again, we talked about behavioral data, but let's look at like school-wide behavioral data, academic data, parent involvement data, teacher retention and turnover data. Again, we are very good at data analysis. So we can be very helpful with recognizing patterns and understanding what may be going wrong within the building or what could be improved within the building in ways that, again, can elevate the entire school culture and work for all people involved in the school building. Making sure that the school psychologists are active members of that MTSS process. Like I said, some school psychologists and some schools are even the facilitator of that
Wow.
MTSS process, but also making sure that the school psychologist is involved in the discipline teams and
Wow.
processes at the school, I think is super important because, again, we are data analyzers. And so if you are trying to reduce your suspension rates and things like that, talk to the school psychologist for help with figuring out what is happening and then how an intervention can be put in place either to address a specific pocket of behavior or a specific pocket of students, or if there's something that needs to happen on a school-wide, more broad basis to encourage positive behavior overall. I've had times in the past where students who had an IEP, individualized education plan, because they were part of the special education program, engage in some sort of behavior and have a disciplinary infraction as a result. And so those students are supposed to go through their own process with regard to discipline and how that's handled. I won't get into the details of that, but germane to that process is a particular meeting in which it is discussed whether the behavior was a manifestation of that child's disability or not. It would seem like a important person to have at that meeting
Yes.
would be a school psychologist
Yes.
because they are uniquely qualified to, again, I said we are trained in the psychology of learning. And so if a child has a diagnosis, we could definitely talk about how that child's diagnosis would or would not impact their behavior. And so making sure that that person is a part of those meetings and those processes, I think is going to be a very important thing. And I don't want to get on a soapbox about that. I'll just leave it there.
Now, I've led many of MDR meetings in my past. And yes, the school psychologist, I wanted them there to talk about the behavior and the characteristics of the behavior and reference that DSM manual with that specific characteristics of the behavior to talk through those conversations. I will get on that soapbox with you. I agree. Because we have a certain level of educators and leaders, but you all have the specifics, like you said, the components, the breakdown, the data. And it's really important to have the school psychologist at that meeting to talk about, the infraction, how the infraction presented itself, and then align it with the exceptionality of the student and how it
Right.
manifests.
And then more importantly, to then talk about how do we make sure this doesn't happen again?
Correct.
And I think that's the part that gets missed or set aside. We're in such a hurry to provide disciplinary action to address the behavior, but we're not really addressing the behavior.
Correct. So it happens again and
So it
again and
happens again and again. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have those larger, more systemic issues that, and you have overarching school-wide behavior data that might paint a picture of your school as being something that it's not. But if we can work with these students, really get to the heart of what's happening and prevent it from happening again, your numbers will come down overall.
Yes. And this is such a great information. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for just providing that pinpoint or that the exposure of what a school psychologist really does.
It's
And
my absolute pleasure.
yeah, I love it. Love it. I want to give our listeners the opportunity if they want to reach out to you, contact information. Do you want to just tell us how we can contact you? They can follow you on Instagram. So I'll let you just read through how to contact you for any type of information. You have a business, correct?
Sure. Yeah. So I am currently a postdoctoral fellow at the Corley Institute in Smyrna, Georgia. We do offer hybrid services. So we do virtual and in-person therapy. We do provide psychoeducational evaluations for diagnostic consideration. I also offer educational advocacy supports. So when parents are, entering into this world of possibly having, a student with a disability and they're trying to figure out how to get their child's needs met and they just want someone to walk alongside them, I can help you with that. Or if you're further along in the process and maybe you're having a little bit of a dispute with the school about your child's supports and services and you need, someone to help you navigate that, I can offer those supports as well. I also offer some of that training that I talked about. That's something I still enjoy and love to do. And so I'm happy to come into schools to provide some training on particular topics if you have a focus area of need, or if you're wanting some program evaluation, if you're trying to understand how to make your MTSS process work better in your schools. I'm happy to provide that consultation as well. So you can find me at our website, corleyinstitute.org. My email is mphiниzy@corleyinstitute.com. I'm also on Instagram. My Instagram is still very new, so I'm still working on building that up, but it's at it's Dr. Millie. And then our phone number is 770-634-2349. And if you call that number, you will be greeted by the lovely Melissa. She is our office manager, and she can get you directed to me or get you scheduled for an appointment for an initial intake, a consultation, or whatever your needs may be.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Phinizy, for sharing your information, the knowledge, the resources, and showing how a school psychologist, it takes a village and we're better together, and how their role is instrumental in the school and in the community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Glad to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I look forward to more information about the other members of our village I'm sure you have coming up in the series.
Yes, and I'm just thinking, I'm like, oh, you talked about executive functioning. So maybe I can have you dive into that conversation. That's a good one.
Oh, that's a hefty topic. And it's definitely something that is in people's minds, forefront of people's minds more so these days, as more people are identifying themselves as being neurodivergent and having executive functioning challenges. So love to come back and talk about that if you'd have me.
I would love to have you. That's my invitation there. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
As we close out Essential Knowledge for today, I'm not going to read a book excerpt, but I do want to remind you that my books are on Amazon, and in all of my books, Essential Tips for Parents, Coordinators, Educators, and Leaders, I discuss the role of a school psychologist and how that all comes together, and the role that the school psychologists play as far as helping support students with placement of special education with Section 504, which aligns with the interview that Dr. Phinizy provided today. Make sure that you purchase a copy of my book. I would love for you to purchase a copy. There is the QR code on the visual, and let's get essential. And as I stated, we won't do a book excerpt for today. Now let's tie it up with our word of wisdom. And our word of wisdom is dedicated to our school psychologists. Behind every child who believes in themselves is a school psychologist who believes in them first. And the author is unknown. Kudos to the school psychologists who are helping our students. It really does take a village. And I hope that this segment today provided some insight and some information on how your school psychologist can be a resource and a support to enhance the positive school environment. I want to encourage you to get essential and explore resources that truly support your journey in education, parenthood, and leadership. I've written a variety of books,
specifically designed for leaders, educators, parents, and Section 504 coordinators. Each one created to inspire action, build capacity, and strengthen impact. All of my books are available on Amazon and the Edufaith Consulting website. Be sure to follow me on Amazon under Dr. Nakia Simmons Cotton to stay updated on new releases and empowering content created just for you. We have essential tips for special education leaders, essential tips for educators, essential tips for Section 504 coordinators, and essential tips for parents. Now it's time to share. I enjoy connecting with listeners, offering advice, and answering questions and sharing inspirational stories. I want to use this platform to share and care. Essential advice is your turn to ask for advice or share good news. The letters will remain anonymous and the stories will be featured on the podcast. Sharing is caring. Please email me at edufaithforall@gmail.com. That is EDUFAITH, the number 4ALL@gmail.com. All listeners should adhere to district policies, follow protocols, remain ethical, and adhere to guidelines in the best interest of children. Edufaith Essentials does not assume responsibility or is legally liable for anyone's actions based on the information in this podcast. Before I go, I want to invite you to subscribe to www.edufaithconsulting.com to stay connected and informed. When you subscribe, you'll receive a monthly newsletter packed with fresh resources, leadership tips, and an insightful blog to support your growth as an educator, leader, or parent. www.edufaithconsulting.com. Scroll down, enter your email address, and click subscribe. Don't forget to check out and subscribe to the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page, where you'll find practical videos, interviews, and essential strategies designed to empower your work and purpose. Let's grow together, stay connected, and stay equipped. Get essential. At Edufaith Educational Services, we are committed to equipping families, educators, and leaders with tools, training, and support they need to thrive in today's educational landscape. In addition to our podcast, we provide a wide variety of educational services designed to address the needs of parents, support with disability services, meeting advocacy, service explanations, educators, guidance, coaching, professional development, and leaders, training, professional coaching, leadership coaching, and support with diverse learners and programs. We also specialize in college and accommodation advocacy, including SAT and ACT accommodation support, college and career readiness coaching, and parent education training for schools, organizations, and community groups. Our expertise extends to program development and review, including Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Section 504, and inclusive practice frameworks. We offer customized professional development for schools, districts, nonprofits, and businesses focused on supporting diverse learners and inclusive education. Edufaith is also proud to offer trainings based on our impactful Essential Tips book series, including Essential Tips for Special Education Leaders, Essential Tips for Section 504 coordinators, and Essential Tips for parents and educators. These sessions provide practical strategies, compliance guidance, and leadership insight grounded in real work experience and align with current educational policies. Go to www.edufaithconsulting.com to see what Edufaith can do to support you. Don't forget to follow Edufaith on social media to stay connected, inspire, and informed. Join us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page, TikTok, and other social media platforms for daily tips, encouragement, upcoming events, and behind-the-scenes updates. Whether you're a parent, educator, or a leader, our social media platforms offer valuable content, community engagement, and practical strategies to support your journey. Stay in the know and be a part of the movement. Follow Edufaith today. As we close out, I want to thank you for listening to today's episode and thank you for staying connected to the Edufaith Essentials podcast. Don't miss a moment to listen to the Edufaith Essentials podcast on your favorite platforms, including Pandora, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and all other podcast platforms, including Buzzsprout. All links to the podcast and information is easily accessible on the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page. Tune in, subscribe, and join us as we inspire and equip you every step of the way. Dr. Nakia here signing off, reminding you to be the light, be the change, love someone. Let's restore faith in education one student at a time, and let's get essential.